Ma'am, I'm going to need you to move to economy. This seat is reserved for our premium passengers. 72-year-old Dr. Eleanor Hayes looked up from her book, a first edition of James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time, and blinked at the flight attendant standing over her. The young woman, sharp-featured with a name tag that read Brittany, wore an expression that Eleanor had seen 1,000 times in her life. The look that said, "You don't belong here." "I'm sorry." Eleanor's voice was soft, cultured, with the faint traces of her South Carolina roots that 6 decades of education and travel hadn't quite erased. "There must be some mistake. This is my seat. 2A. "I can see that," Brittany said, her tone dripping with barely concealed irritation. "But we've had a complaint from another passenger about the seating arrangement. We'd be happy to accommodate you in coach." Eleanor felt her chest tighten. Not with fear. She'd lived through too much to be afraid of a flight attendant with a power complex. But with a bone-deep weariness that came from fighting the same battle over and over again. She was wearing a simple but elegant navy pantsuit from her private tailor in Paris, pearls that had belonged to her mother, and sensible flats that cost more than Brittany probably made in a week. Her salt and pepper hair was cut in a stylish bob, and her makeup was understated but perfect. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman of means, taste, and accomplishment. But Brittany wasn't seeing any of that. She was seeing a black woman in first class and making assumptions. "Young lady," Eleanor said quietly, "I paid full price for this seat. I'm not moving." "Ma'am, I'm trying to be polite here." "Then be polite. Stop asking me to move from the seat I purchased." Brittany's face flushed. "Look, I don't want to make a scene, but if you don't cooperate, I'll have to call the captain." "Then call him." Eleanor returned to her book, her hands steady even though her heart was racing. She'd been the first black woman to graduate from Harvard Business School in 1975. She'd built a healthcare empire that employed over 50,000 people. She'd advised 3 presidents. And she sure as hell wasn't being intimidated by a flight attendant on a power trip. Brittany's mouth tightened into a thin line. She stalked off toward the cockpit, her heels clicking aggressively against the cabin floor. Eleanor exhaled slowly. She'd been flying first class for 40 years and still, this happened. Not every time, but often enough that she'd developed a protocol: stay calm, document everything, and never, ever let them see you sweat. She pulled out her phone and opened her text thread with her granddaughter. "Having a situation on Flight 892. Flight attendant trying to move me to coach. Handling it, but wanted you to know in case this escalates." The response came immediately. "What? Grandma, do not move. I'm tracking the flight." "Recording this?" Eleanor smiled slightly. "Boys." She activated her phone's voice recorder and slipped it into her breast pocket, microphone facing out. Her lawyer had taught her that years ago: document everything. Around her, other first-class passengers were starting to notice the commotion. A white woman in her 50s across the aisle caught Eleanor's eye and mouthed, "Are you okay?" Eleanor nodded graciously. At least someone had sense. Brittany returned with backup, a male flight attendant who looked uncomfortable and an older woman with "Senior Flight Attendant" on her badge. The older woman, whose name tag read Sharon, had the weary look of someone who'd been dealing with bullshit for 30 years and was tired of it. "Dr. Hayes?" Sharon said, and Eleanor felt a flicker of hope at the use of her title. "I apologize for the confusion. There's been a complaint from another passenger, and we're trying to sort it out." "What kind of complaint?" Eleanor asked. Sharon hesitated. "A passenger in 2B has expressed concerns about sitting next to you." There was. "Plain as day." "Concerns?" Eleanor repeated flatly. What kind of concerns could this passenger possibly have about a 72-year-old woman reading a book? Sharon's expression showed she knew exactly what kind of concerns, and she was mortified by them. "Ma'am, I'm trying to handle this delicately." "Then handle it by telling the passenger in 2B that their concerns are unfounded and discriminatory," Eleanor said, her voice still soft but now edged with steel. "I'm not moving. And if you try to force me to move, I'll have my lawyers so far up this airline's ass that you'll be finding legal briefs in your flight manuals for the next decade." Brittany gasped. "You can't speak to us like that." I can speak however I damn well please. I'm a paying customer being discriminated against. Eleanor looked at Sharon. You know this is wrong. I can see it on your face. So either do the right thing, or get out of my way so I can file a formal complaint. Sharon looked torn. Then she sighed. Let me talk to the passenger in 2B. She disappeared down the aisle. Brittany remained, hovering like a hostile hummingbird. You know, Brittany said quietly, you're making this so much harder than it needs to be. We're just trying to keep everyone comfortable. Everyone? Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Or just the white passenger who doesn't want to sit next to a black woman? I never said anything about race. You didn't have to. Eleanor closed her book. I've been dealing with this particular flavor of bullshit since before you were born, sweetheart. I know exactly what this is. Brittany's face went scarlet. I could have you removed from this flight for being disruptive. Try it, please. I would absolutely love to see you try it. Eleanor pulled out her phone, showing the recording app clearly visible on screen. Because I've been recording this entire interaction, and I'm fairly certain your supervisor would be fascinated to hear how you handled a complaint of racial discrimination. Brittany paled. You can't record. I absolutely can. Check your employee handbook. Single-party consent in New York, where we're departing from. Everything you've said to me is documented. Eleanor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. So please, continue to threaten me. I'm sure it'll play great in the inevitable lawsuit. The male flight attendant, who'd been silent this whole time, touched Brittany's arm. Maybe we should wait for Sharon. Stay out of this, Derek. But Derek was already backing away, recognizing a losing battle when he saw one. Eleanor's phone buzzed. A text from her granddaughter. Grandma, I'm on with Mom. She's losing her mind. Do you need us to call someone? Eleanor typed back, not yet. But stand by. What Eleanor's granddaughter, and what Brittany definitely didn't know, was that Mom was Victoria Hayes, Eleanor's daughter and the current vice president of corporate relations for Skyway Airlines. The very airline they were currently flying on. And Victoria was about to lose her goddamn mind. Sharon returned, and Eleanor could tell immediately from her expression that the conversation with 2B hadn't gone well. Dr. Hayes, Sharon said quietly, the passenger is being difficult. But I want you to know that you're absolutely in the right here. You're not moving. She turned to Brittany. The passenger in 2B will be moved to another seat. We'll find space elsewhere. But, Brittany started. That's final, Sharon said firmly. And Brittany, I need to see you in the galley. Now. They walked away, Brittany's posture radiating indignation. Eleanor could hear raised voices from the galley but couldn't make out the words. The white woman across the aisle leaned over. I'm so sorry you had to deal with that. It's absolutely disgraceful. Thank you, Eleanor said genuinely. But it's nothing new. It should be. It's 2025, for God's sake. The woman shook her head. I'm Martha, by the way. Martha Goldstein. Eleanor Hayes. Nice to meet you, despite the circumstances. Hayes. Martha's eyes widened. As in Hayes Medical Solutions? The Dr. Eleanor Hayes? The very same. Holy shit. Martha's hand flew to her mouth. Sorry, but holy shit. You revolutionized electronic health records. My husband's a surgeon. He uses your systems every day. She looked toward where Brittany had disappeared. Does that idiot flight attendant have any idea who you are? I suspect she's about to find out. And indeed, Sharon was returning, with Brittany trailing behind her looking like she'd been slapped. The younger flight attendant's eyes were red, her jaw tight. Dr. Hayes, Sharon said formally, on behalf of Skyway Airlines, I apologize for this incident. The passenger from 2B is being relocated. Your seat is confirmed, and we're upgrading you to our premium first-class service for the duration of the flight, complimentary champagne, premium meal selection, the works. That's not necessary, Eleanor started. It's the least we can do. And Brittany has something she'd like to say. Brittany looked like she'd rather eat glass, but she managed to choke out, I apologize for any inconvenience, Dr. Hayes. It was the most insincere apology Eleanor had ever heard, but she accepted it with grace. Apology accepted. They dispersed, and Eleanor finally allowed herself to relax slightly. She texted her granddaughter, "Crisis averted. For now. Grandma, Mom is on the phone with the CEO. This isn't over." Eleanor smiled. Her daughter had inherited her tenacity and her intolerance for bullshit. Someone was about to have a very bad day. But as the plane prepared for takeoff, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. She'd seen the look in Brittany's eyes, humiliation mixed with resentment. That was a dangerous combination. She was right to be concerned. Because what Eleanor didn't know was that Brittany had an Instagram following of 50,000 people, where she regularly posted about difficult passengers and people who don't understand how airlines work. And Brittany was already composing a post in her head, one that would frame Eleanor as an entitled, aggressive passenger who'd threatened her. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The plane reached cruising altitude, and Eleanor tried to focus on her book. But her mind kept wandering. She'd been through worse than this, much worse. Growing up in rural South Carolina in the 1950s, surviving Jim Crow, fighting for her education, building her company from nothing while being told at every turn that she didn't belong. But God, she was tired of fighting. She was 72 years old. She'd earned her peace. And yet here she was, still having to prove her right to exist in spaces that should welcome her. Sharon brought her the promised champagne. "Again, Dr. Hayes, I'm truly sorry about all of this." "It's not your fault," Eleanor said gently. "You handled it professionally." "Brittany is new," Sharon said, lowering her voice. "Still learning. But that's no excuse for what happened." "No, it's not." Eleanor sipped the champagne. "Can I ask you something? Off the record?" Sharon glanced around, then nodded. "Does this happen often? Passengers complaining about sitting next to people who don't look like them." Sharon's expression turned pained. "More than it should. Usually we try to handle it quietly, move the complaining passenger without making a fuss. But Brittany," she trailed off. "She's young. She didn't think it through." "Or she agreed with the passenger," Eleanor said bluntly. Sharon didn't deny it. "I'll be filing a report about this incident. For what it's worth." "Thank you." After Sharon left, Eleanor pulled out her phone. She had 17 text messages, 6 missed calls, and 3 voicemails. All from her daughter Victoria. She called back. Victoria answered on the first ring. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby. Just some ignorant people being ignorant." "I'm not fine. Mom, I'm the VP of Corporate Relations for Skyway. This happened on MY Airline." "To MY mother." Victoria's voice was shaking with rage. "I've already spoken to the CEO. There's going to be an investigation. That flight attendant is being suspended pending review. And the passenger who complained is being banned from Skyway." "Victoria." "No. This is exactly the kind of shit we're supposed to be training our people not to do. We have protocols. We have diversity training. We have explicit policies against discriminating against passengers. And somehow, this still happened." Victoria took a breath. "Where's Jasmine? Is she with you?" "No, I'm traveling alone. Jasmine's in LA, working on her case." Jasmine, Eleanor's granddaughter, Victoria's daughter, was a 28-year-old civil rights attorney who'd made a name for herself taking on discrimination cases. She'd inherited Eleanor's fire and Victoria's strategic mind, and she was absolutely relentless. "She's threatening to fly out to meet your plane when you land," Victoria said. "I had to talk her down. She wanted to sue the airline." "She can't sue the airline. You work there." She pointed that out. Said it was a conflict of interest and she'd refer it to a colleague. Victoria laughed despite herself. "That's my daughter. Ready to burn down my employer to defend her grandmother." Eleanor felt warmth spread through her chest. "You raised her well." "We raised her well. You, me, and her father. She's got your courage, Mom. And your stubbornness." "That too." Victoria's tone shifted. "Mom, I need you to know, this isn't going away. I'm making sure of it. That flight attendant violated company policy, and there will be consequences. I don't want to cost that girl her job. That girl humiliated a 72-year-old woman in front of a plane full of people because of her race. She needs to face consequences. That's how people learn. Eleanor knew Victoria was right. But she'd spent so much of her life trying to be gracious, trying not to make waves, trying to prove she wasn't the angry black woman stereotype. Sometimes she wondered if all that graciousness had just enabled more discrimination. "Okay," she said finally. "Do what you need to do." "I will." "And Mom? I'm so sorry this happened to you." "Not your fault, baby." "Feels like it should be. I work for this airline. I help shape its policies. And somehow, my own mother gets treated like this." We can't control other people's prejudices. We can only control how we respond to them. "That's very zen of you, Mom. I'm more in the burn it all down phase." Eleanor smiled. "Wonder where you get that from." They talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. Eleanor looked out the window at the clouds below, feeling the familiar ache of exhaustion mixed with determination. She'd rest when she was dead. Until then, she'd keep fighting. 2 rows behind her, a passenger was recording everything on his phone. His name was David Martinez, and he was a freelance journalist always looking for his next viral story. He'd witnessed the entire confrontation with the flight attendant, and he'd been recording since the moment Brittany first approached Eleanor. This was going to be huge. He was already composing the tweet in his head, "Elderly black woman humiliated by at Skyway Airlines flight attendant." Full video coming soon. This is 2025, and this is still happening. #Skyway shame, #discrimination. But before he could post anything, he wanted the full story. He needed to know who this woman was, why the airline had backed down so quickly, and what was going to happen next. David unbuckled and walked up to Eleanor's row. "Excuse me, ma'am? I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm a journalist. I witnessed what happened earlier, and I recorded it. I'd like to share your story, if you're willing." Eleanor looked at him carefully. He was young, maybe 30, with earnest eyes and a press badge hanging from his neck. "What kind of journalist?" "Freelance. I write for various outlets. BuzzFeed, Vice, The Intercept. I focus on civil rights issues, discrimination, social justice." "And you want to make me your next story?" "I want to make what happened to you visible," David corrected. "Because I'm guessing this isn't the first time something like this has happened. And it won't be the last unless we shine a light on it." Eleanor considered. She'd spent most of her life avoiding the spotlight, preferring to do her work quietly. But maybe David was right. Maybe silence wasn't serving anyone. "Give me your card," she said finally. "I need to think about it." David handed over his business card eagerly. "Thank you, Dr. Hayes." She raised an eyebrow. "How did you know my name?" "I heard the flight attendant use it. And then I Googled you." He smiled sheepishly. "You're kind of a big deal." "Kind of. Okay, you're a huge deal. Which makes this whole thing even more insane. That flight attendant had no idea who she was messing with." "It shouldn't matter who I am," Eleanor said quietly. "I could be a janitor or a CEO. I still deserve to be treated with respect." "You're absolutely right. But the fact that you're Dr. Eleanor Hayes, founder of Hayes Medical Solutions, and you still got treated like this? That's the story. Because if this can happen to you, it's happening to everyone." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I'll think about it. Now please let me read my book." David retreated, but Eleanor could feel his excitement. This was about to go very public, whether she liked it or not. She texted Jasmine, "A journalist wants to interview me about the incident. What do you think?" Jasmine's response was immediate, "Do it. Grandma, you have a platform. Use it. How many other people go through this and don't have your resources to fight back? Tell your story." Eleanor smiled. Her granddaughter was absolutely right. She waved David back over. "Let's talk." By the time the plane landed in Miami, David Martinez had already posted a thread on Twitter that was rapidly going viral. Thread: "Today I witnessed at Skyway Airlines flight attendant attempt to remove elderly black woman from first class after white passenger complained about sitting next to her. What the FA didn't know, the woman she was harassing is Dr. Eleanor Hayes, healthcare legend and literal genius." The thread continued with details of the incident, including carefully edited video clips that David had recorded. He'd been smart about it. No identifying information about other passengers, just clear footage of Brittany demanding Eleanor move and Eleanor's calm, dignified responses. By the time the plane touched down, the thread had 50,000 retweets and was trending under #SkywayShame and #JusticeForDr Hayes. Eleanor was blissfully unaware of all of this as she gathered her carry-on and prepared to deplane. Sharon approached her one more time. "Dr. Hayes, we've arranged for you to deplane first, and we have a representative from Skyway waiting to speak with you at the gate." "That's really not necessary. Please, let us do this." Eleanor sighed and agreed. As she walked up the jet bridge, she noticed other passengers pulling out their phones, some taking pictures. That was odd. At the gate, a man in an expensive suit was waiting with a woman Eleanor recognized, her daughter Victoria, who must have flown down from Atlanta the moment she'd heard what happened. "Mom!" Victoria rushed forward, embracing her. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby. What are you doing here?" "I flew down as soon as I could. Mom, this is Richard Chin, TO of Skyway Airlines." The man in the suit stepped forward, looking genuinely distressed. "Dr. Hayes, I cannot apologize enough for what you experienced on our airline today. This is not who we are, and there will be consequences." "Mr. Chin, please, let me finish." He ran a hand through his graying hair. "What happened today is a failure of training, a failure of culture, and ultimately a failure of leadership, my leadership. We pride ourselves on being an inclusive airline, and today we failed you spectacularly." Eleanor studied him. He seemed sincere, but she'd met enough executives to know that sincerity and action were two different things. "What kind of consequences are we talking about?" she asked. "The flight attendant who confronted you, Brittany Williams, has been suspended without pay pending a full investigation. If the investigation confirms what's been reported, she'll be terminated. The passenger who initially complained has been permanently banned from Skyway. And we're reviewing our protocols for handling discrimination complaints to ensure this never happens again." "That's a start," Eleanor said. "But what about the systemic issues? How often does this happen to passengers who don't have my resources or my daughter working for your airline?" Richard looked uncomfortable. "I don't have exact numbers." "Then get them. Because I guarantee this isn't an isolated incident. It's just the first one that made it to the CO." Victoria squeezed her mother's hand, pride evident on her face. "You're right," Richard admitted. "And I promise you, we're going to do a comprehensive review of all discrimination complaints filed in the past 5 years. We're also implementing mandatory retraining for all customer-facing staff, and we're creating an independent oversight committee to review discrimination allegations." "I want a seat on that committee," Eleanor said bluntly. Richard blinked. "Of course, we'd be honored." "I'm not doing it for the honor. I'm doing it because I don't trust airlines to police themselves. You need outside voices, people with lived experience, to hold you accountable." "Agreed. Completely agreed." Eleanor's phone buzzed insistently. She glanced at it and saw 57 notifications. "What the hell?" Victoria pulled out her own phone and showed her mother the screen. David Martinez's thread was everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. News outlets were already picking up the story. "Mom," Victoria said softly, "you're trending." Eleanor read through the thread, her eyebrows climbing higher with each tweet. The replies were overwhelming. Thousands of people sharing their own stories of discrimination while traveling, thanking Eleanor for standing her ground, calling for boycotts of Skyway. "Oh my," Eleanor said faintly. "Grandma!" A voice rang out across the terminal, and Eleanor looked up to see Jasmine running toward them, her professional blazer flying behind her like a cape. She crashed into Eleanor with a fierce hug. "Are you okay?" "I saw everything online. I'm going to destroy them. I'm going to sue everyone. That flight attendant, the passenger who complained, the entire airline." "Jasmine, breathe," Victoria said. "I can't breathe. They humiliated my grandmother." Jasmine whirled on Richard Chin. "You're the CEO? We need to talk about punitive damages, public apologies, and a complete overhaul of your discrimination policies." Jasmine is a civil rights attorney, Victoria explained to Richard, who was looking slightly terrified. A very angry civil rights attorney, Jasmine added. Grandma, please tell me you're letting me represent you. Eleanor looked at her granddaughter, fierce, brilliant, ready to go to war. She looked at her daughter, powerful, strategic, already working from the inside to change things. And she looked at Richard Chin, who seemed genuinely committed to making this right. I don't want to sue, Eleanor said finally. What? Jasmine looked betrayed. I want something better than money. I want change. Eleanor turned to Richard. Mr. Chin, here's what I want. Full transparency on how Skyway handles discrimination complaints. Regular audits by independent civil rights organizations. Mandatory implicit bias training for all employees, from baggage handlers to executives. A whistleblower hotline for employees who witness discrimination. And a real, funded commitment to diversity, not just in hiring, but in leadership positions. Richard was nodding frantically, pulling out his phone to take notes. Just all of that. Whatever you want. And I want you to know that my granddaughter will be watching, Eleanor added, putting an arm around Jasmine. If you don't follow through, she really will sue you into oblivion. That's my grandma, Jasmine said, beaming. Eleanor's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. Dr. Hayes, this is David Martinez. The thread is blowing up. Would you be willing to do an interview? I think your voice could really drive change here. Eleanor showed the text to Victoria and Jasmine. Do it, they said in unison. Okay, Eleanor said. But I'm doing it on my terms. She called David. Mr. Martinez, I'll give you an interview. But I want to make something clear. This isn't about me. This is about every person who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong. Every black traveler who's been followed by security, questioned about their ticket, or asked to move because they made someone uncomfortable. Can you tell that story? Yes, David said immediately. Absolutely yes. That's exactly the story I want to tell. Good. Then let's talk. Over the next hour, Eleanor gave David a comprehensive interview, sitting in a quiet corner of the airport while Victoria and Jasmine ran interference. She talked about her childhood in South Carolina, about fighting for her education, about building her company. She talked about the subtle and not-so-subtle racism she'd faced throughout her career. And she talked about what had happened on the flight, not with anger, but with the weary wisdom of someone who'd been fighting this fight for 72 years. You know what the saddest part is? Eleanor said at one point. I wasn't even surprised. When that flight attendant asked me to move, my first thought wasn't, this is outrageous. It was, here we go again. Because this is what it's like to be black in America. Even in 2025. Even when you've achieved everything society says you're supposed to achieve. You still have to prove your right to exist in certain spaces. David was scribbling notes frantically. Do you think things have gotten better? In some ways, yes. In other ways, the discrimination is more subtle now, more coded. But it's still there. Eleanor paused. But here's what gives me hope. My granddaughter's generation isn't willing to accept this bullshit. They're angrier, louder, less patient. And that's good. That's how change happens. What do you want people to take away from your story? That we're all human. That we all deserve dignity. And that silence enables discrimination. If you see something, say something. Don't be a bystander. Eleanor looked directly at the camera David was using to record. And to any airline employee who might be watching, when a passenger complains about sitting next to someone because of their race, you don't move the victim. You educate the bigot. Or you remove them. Those are your only two options. The interview went live that evening. Within hours, it had been viewed over 2 million times. By morning, it was on every major news network. Skyway Airlines stock dropped by 3%. The hashtag Skyway shame was trending worldwide. And Brittany Williams, the flight attendant who'd started it all, was about to face the internet's wrath. Brittany Williams had made a critical mistake. Instead of staying quiet and letting Skyway's PR team handle the fallout, she'd gone on social media to defend herself. Her Instagram post read, "To everyone attacking me over today's incident, You don't know the full story. The passenger was aggressive and threatening. I was just doing my job and trying to keep everyone safe. But sure, make me the villain because that's easier than hearing the truth. The response was immediate and brutal. You tried to move an elderly woman because a racist passenger complained. That's not doing your job. That's being complicit in discrimination. Aggressive and threatening? She was reading a book. The only thing Dr. Hayes threatened was your ignorance. Jasmine saw the post and immediately called her grandmother. Grandma, that flight attendant is trying to paint you as the aggressor. We need to respond. No, Eleanor said calmly. We don't need to do anything. She's digging her own grave. Let her. But, Jasmine, I've been dealing with people like Brittany my entire life. They always try to flip the script, make themselves the victim. But the truth is already out there. David's interview, the video footage, the testimonies from other passengers. Her lies won't hold up. Eleanor was right. Within an hour, other passengers from Flight 892 had started posting their own accounts of what happened. Martha Goldstein, the woman who'd sat across from Eleanor, posted a detailed Facebook thread describing exactly what she'd witnessed. I was on this flight. I saw everything. Dr. Hayes was nothing but gracious and dignified. The flight attendant was dismissive, rude, and clearly biased. Don't let anyone rewrite this story. David Martinez posted additional footage, including audio he'd captured of Brittany saying to another flight attendant, I don't know why people like that even fly first class. They should stick to their own section. People like that. Those 4 words ended Brittany's career. Skyway Airlines released a statement that evening. After a thorough investigation, we have terminated the employment of the flight attendant involved in yesterday's incident aboard Flight 892. We have zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind. We are committed to ensuring that all passengers are treated with dignity and respect. But the story didn't end there. Jasmine, working with a coalition of civil rights attorneys, filed a class action lawsuit against Skyway on behalf of all passengers who'd experienced discrimination while flying the airline. She wasn't seeking damages for her grandmother. Eleanor had refused to be part of the suit. But Jasmine had found dozens of other passengers, mostly people of color, who'd faced similar treatment. One woman, a black professor, had been accused of stealing her own first-class seat and removed from a flight in handcuffs. A Latino businessman had been asked to prove his ticket was legitimate 3 times during a single flight. A Muslim woman had been asked to remove her hijab for security reasons, while white passengers breezed through unchecked. The stories were endless, heartbreaking, and enraging. Jasmine held a press conference outside Skyway's corporate headquarters in Atlanta. Eleanor stood beside her, along with a dozen other plaintiffs. My grandmother's story went viral because she has resources, connections, and a platform, Jasmine told the assembled reporters. But for every Dr. Eleanor Hayes who gets justice, there are hundreds of regular people who suffer in silence. People who are afraid to speak up because they don't have power or money or a daughter who's a VP at the airline. This lawsuit is for them. The press conference was televised live. Victoria watched from her office at Skyway, tears streaming down her face. She'd spent the last week in meetings, fighting with executives, demanding change. Some wanted to dig in and fight the lawsuit. Victoria had argued passionately for settlement and reform. We're not winning this, she told Richard Chin. And we don't deserve to win this. We failed these passengers. We failed my mother. So we settle, we apologize, and we do better. Or I quit and join my daughter's lawsuit. Richard had looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Draw up the terms. Whatever it takes. The settlement was announced 6 weeks later. Skyway agreed to pay $15 million to the class action plaintiffs. But more importantly, they agreed to comprehensive reforms. Independent audits of all discrimination complaints. Mandatory implicit bias training for all employees, repeated annually. A diversity committee with the power to investigate and make binding recommendations. Partnership with civil rights organizations to review policies. Public reporting of discrimination complaints and their resolutions. Zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, with clear consequences. Eleanor was named chair of the diversity committee. Jasmine was named as one of the independent auditors. And Victoria, after much soul-searching, stayed with Skyway. "I can do more good from the inside," she told her mother and daughter. "But I'm doing it on my terms now." 3 months after the incident, Eleanor was invited to speak at Skyway's annual employee conference. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. She stood before 10,000 airline employees and told her story. Not with anger, but with honesty. "I know some of you are here because you have to be," she said. "I know some of you think this is all an overreaction, that we're making too big a deal out of one incident. But I want you to understand something. It's never just one incident. It's 1,000. Small cuts over a lifetime. It's being made to feel like you don't belong over and over again until you start to believe it yourself." The room was silent. "But here's what I also know," Eleanor continued. "People can change. Companies can change. I've lived long enough to see segregated water fountains disappear. I've lived long enough to see a black president. I've lived long enough to know that progress is possible, but only if we're willing to do the hard work of confronting our biases and changing our systems." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "So I'm asking you, all of you, to be part of the solution. When you see discrimination, speak up. When you see a colleague treating a passenger differently because of their race or religion or appearance, intervene. Don't be a bystander. Because every time we stay silent, we are complicit. And we're better than that. We have to be better than that." The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous crescendo. Eleanor stood at the podium, watching as 10,000 people rose to their feet. She saw tears on some faces, determination on others. And in the front row, she saw her daughter and granddaughter, both crying openly. After the speech, Eleanor was swarmed by employees wanting to shake her hand, share their own stories, thank her for her courage. A young black flight attendant, no older than 25, approached her with tears streaming down her face. "Dr. Hayes, I'm Keisha. I work the Atlanta-New York route. And I needed to say thank you. Because what happened to you has happened to me too. Passengers questioning whether I'm really the flight attendant, asking for someone else to help them, complaining about me for no reason. And I thought it was just me. I thought I was being too sensitive." Eleanor took the young woman's hands. "It's not you, sweetheart. It was never you. And you're not too sensitive. You're exactly sensitive enough." "I was thinking about quitting," Keisha admitted. "But after your speech, I think I'm going to stay. Someone needs to be here to make sure this place actually changes." "That's the spirit," Eleanor said, squeezing her hands. "Be the change. Hold them accountable. And if anyone gives you trouble, you have my number now." Keisha laughed through her tears. "You're giving me your number? Damn right I am. We're sisters in this fight. We look out for each other." More employees came forward with similar stories. A Latina gate agent who'd been told she didn't look professional enough because of her accent. An Asian American pilot who'd been asked by passengers if he was qualified to fly. A Muslim customer service representative who'd been harassed by passengers and received no support from management. Eleanor listened to all of them, collected their contact information, and promised to bring their concerns to the diversity committee. This was bigger than one incident on one flight. This was systemic, pervasive, and it required systemic solutions. That evening, Eleanor, Victoria, and Jasmine had dinner at Eleanor's favorite restaurant in Atlanta, a soul food place that had been there since the 1960s. They sat in a corner booth, exhausted but satisfied. "You did good today, Mom," Victoria said, raising her glass of sweet tea. "Really good." "We all did good," Eleanor corrected. "Victoria, you fought from the inside. Jasmine, you fought from the outside. We made a hell of a team." "The Hayes women always do," Jasmine said with a grin. "Grandma, can I ask you something? Were you scared? On that plane, when it was happening?" Eleanor thought about it. "No, not scared. I've been through too much to be scared of a flight attendant with a bad attitude. But I was tired. So tired of having to fight the same battles over and over again. Tired of being strong when I just wanted to read my book and drink my champagne in peace." "I'm sorry you had to go through that," Jasmine said softly. "Don't be sorry. Be active. Keep fighting. Because every generation has to push the needle a little further. I did my part. Your mother did hers. Now it's your turn. What if we can't fix it all? Jasmine asked. What if racism and discrimination never really go away? Then we make it harder for them, Eleanor said firmly. We make it more expensive, more public, more shameful. We build systems that protect people instead of enabling abuse. We raise our voices until they can't ignore us anymore. And most importantly, we teach the next generation to never, ever accept less than they deserve. Her phone buzzed. A text from Martha Goldstein, the woman from the plane. Dr. Hayes, I wanted you to know, I filed complaints with 3 other airlines about similar incidents I've witnessed. I'm done being a silent witness. Thank you for inspiring me to speak up. Eleanor showed the text to her daughter and granddaughter, smiling. See? That's how change happens. One person finds their courage, and it ripples out. You started a movement, Grandma, Jasmine said. I didn't start it. I'm just part of a movement that's been happening for centuries. Standing on the shoulders of everyone who came before me. Rosa Parks, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ida B. Wells. Every woman who refused to move when they were told they didn't belong. Victoria's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her eyebrows shot up. It's Richard Chen. The CEO. Answer it, Eleanor said. Victoria put it on speaker. Richard. Victoria, I'm sorry to bother you during dinner, but I wanted you and Dr. Hayes to hear this first. The board just approved a $50 million investment in diversity and inclusion initiatives over the next 5 years. Real money, real programs, real accountability measures. And it's largely because of today's speech. The employees are energized. They want change. And the board finally understands that this isn't just the right thing to do, it's essential for our business. Eleanor leaned toward the phone. Mr. Chen, I'll believe it when I see it. But I'm cautiously optimistic. I understand your skepticism, Dr. Hayes. And I'm committed to earning your trust. The first diversity committee meeting is scheduled for next week. I hope you'll chair it. I'll be there. And I'm bringing a full agenda. I wouldn't expect anything less. Richard paused. Dr. Hayes, what you did, what your family did, you could have destroyed us. Taken us to court, dragged us through the media, cost us hundreds of millions in damages. Instead, you gave us a chance to be better. I won't waste that chance. See that you don't. Because my granddaughter is still a civil rights attorney, and she's watching very closely. Hi, Mr. Chen, Jasmine said cheerfully. I have all the paperwork ready to file if you screw this up. Richard laughed nervously. Message received. Have a good evening, ladies. They hung up, and Eleanor sat back, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. You know what the best part of all this is? She said. It's not the apology, or the settlement, or even the policy changes. It's knowing that maybe, just maybe, the next 72-year-old black woman who gets on a plane won't have to go through what I went through. That's worth all of it. To making the world better, Victoria said, raising her glass again. To making the world better, Eleanor and Jasmine echoed. They clinked glasses, 3 generations of Hayes women who refused to back down, refused to be silent, and refused to accept a world that didn't value their dignity. Eleanor sat in first class on a Skyway flight, voluntarily this time, heading back to New York for the airline's annual diversity conference. The flight attendant who greeted her was Keisha, the young woman who'd approached her after her speech. Dr. Hayes, it's so good to see you again. Keisha's smile was genuine, warm. Can I get you anything? Champagne? Orange juice? Champagne sounds perfect, thank you. Coming right up. And Dr. Hayes? I just wanted to say, I'm still here. Still fighting. And things are actually getting better. We had a situation last month, a passenger who complained about sitting next to a Muslim woman. And you know what happened? The senior flight attendant removed the complaining passenger and upgraded the Muslim woman to first class. Then she called the passenger's employer to report his discriminatory behavior. Eleanor's eyes widened. She called his employer? She did. Turns out he worked for a company that had a diversity and inclusion policy. He was fired within a week. Keisha grinned. Word got around. People think twice now before complaining about their seatmates. That's incredible. It's because of you. Because you didn't let them sweep it under the rug. You demanded change, and we got it. Keisha squeezed Eleanor's shoulder gently. Thank you. After Keisha left, Eleanor pulled out her phone and texted her daughter and granddaughter. Just heard the most amazing story. I'll tell you when I land. But I think we actually did it. We actually changed something. Victoria's response, proud of you, Mum. Boys. Jasmine's response, that's my grandma. Changing the world one flight at a time. Raised fist medium dark skin tone. Eleanor settled into her seat, opened her book, still Baldwin, always Baldwin, and allowed herself to relax. The plane filled up around her. A diverse array of passengers, all taking their seats without incident, without drama, without anyone being made to feel like they didn't belong. It was such a small thing. Such a basic thing. And it had taken 72 years of her life, plus a national news story, plus a lawsuit, plus policy changes, to achieve it. But God, it felt good. The plane took off smoothly. Eleanor sipped her champagne and thought about all the battles she'd fought, all the indignities she'd endured, all the times she'd had to be twice as good to get half as far. And she thought about her granddaughter, brilliant and fierce, fighting those same battles with new tools and new tactics. And she thought about Keisha and all the young people like her, standing their ground, demanding better, refusing to accept the status quo. The work wasn't finished. It never would be. But they'd moved the needle. They'd pushed the arc of history a little further toward justice. And for today, in this moment, on this flight, Eleanor Hayes could sit in her first-class seat, read her book, and simply exist without having to prove her right to be there. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Eleanor Hayes never flew Skyway without being recognized after that. She became something of a legend in the airline industry, the woman who brought a billion-dollar company to its knees and forced it to be better. She chaired the diversity committee for 3 years before stepping down to write her memoir, First Class, A Life of Fighting for My Seat at the Table. The book became a bestseller. Jasmine Hayes went on to become one of the most prominent civil rights attorneys in the country, winning landmark cases against discriminatory practices in travel, hospitality, and corporate America. Victoria Hayesjan was promoted to Chief Diversity Officer at Skyway Airlines, a position created specifically to ensure that what happened to her mother never happened to anyone else. And Brittany Williams? She never worked in the airline industry again. She tried pivoting to being an influencer, but her brand never recovered from being forever associated with that moment of casual cruelty caught on camera. She eventually left social media entirely. The last anyone heard, she was working at a call center somewhere in Arizona, far from the first-class cabins where she'd once wielded her small powers so carelessly. Some lessons come hard, but they come. And the world keeps turning, hopefully toward justice, hopefully toward change, one small act of courage at a time. If you love stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, help us build a community that can raise awareness. See you in the next video.